All right, let's dive right into one of hip hop's most legendary and honestly most tragic controversies. It's a story that all comes down to one single, explosive B-side. So, was it just a terrible coincidence, or was this a straight up declaration of war? That's what we're here to figure out. We're going to unpack the history, the accusations, the denials, everything surrounding the notorious B.I.G's infamous track, Who Shot Ya? Because, we really need to understand how this one song became the flashpoint in a feud that changed music forever.
Okay, so to really get this whole mystery, you gotta start with two key events: a brutal robbery and the release of a song that sounded, well, a lot like a taunt.
So take a look at these dates. The proximity here is just wild. We're talking less than 3 months separating this violent, almost fatal attack on Tupac from the release of a song with a title that, let's be real, felt incredibly provocative to a lot of people. This timing, this is the spark that lit the whole fuse.
And right from the jump, Biggie was having none of it. He vehemently denied the song had anything to do with Tupac. He was just adamant, saying people were twisting his lyrics, and that the whole connection they were making was, in his own words, just crazy. And right there, that's it. Those are the two narratives that popped up immediately, and honestly, have been debated ever since. On one hand, you've got the official story, a simple, really unfortunate case of bad timing. On the other, the accusation, a calculated and deeply disrespectful shot. So let's put on our investigative hats and look at the evidence for the official story first.
All right, first up in our investigation is the song's official origin story. This is the alibi, really, that forms the core of the entire Bad Boy Records defense.
So the key thing to get here, and this is according to producers like Chucky Thompson and Nashim Myrick, is that this track was floating around in different forms way before Tupac was ever shot. It was originally meant for a totally different project, it got passed around to different artists, and it was even cut from Biggie's own album because they thought it was just too hardcore.
Now, this is probably the single strongest piece of evidence for the defense. I mean, think about it. The beat was actually out there, available to the public, one day before the shooting happened. That release date, November 29th, 1994, is the absolute linchpin of the whole official story.
Okay, but if the backstory is so cut and dry, then why? Why did Tupac and so many of his fans believe it was a diss? Well, let's flip the coin and look at the evidence that really fueled all that suspicion. You see, before this track, Puffy's ad-libs were usually all about the party vibe, right? But on this, they're aggressive, they're territorial. That East Coast motherfuckers shout, it really felt like he was drawing a line in the sand, especially at a time when tensions between the coasts were already starting to boil. And then you've got the lyrics themselves. Critics, and especially Tupac, they just zeroed in on lines like these. That last one in particular, turned front page nigga. I mean, come on, who else was a front page nigga at that exact moment? The media coverage of Tupac's shooting was absolutely massive. So for a lot of people, this felt like a direct, totally undeniable reference. And then, fast forward years later, and this little bombshell drops from a former bad boy president. This statement added a whole new layer to the mystery. It basically suggests that, hey, maybe Biggie didn't mean it as a diss, but the controversy, it might have been strategically fanned by the label just to capitalize on all the buzz. Pretty wild, right? So when you put all the pieces together, the timing, Puffy's ad-libs, those lyrics, you can start to see why Tupac felt like he was being targeted. And to really understand his reaction, we've got to get inside his head a little bit and look at his state of mind at the time. Yeah, it's important to remember, before any of this, Tupac and Biggie were friends. They were cool. So the shooting, it didn't just injure Tupac physically, it absolutely shattered his trust. Tretch from Naughty by Nature, he was a close friend to both of them, and he really explained it best. He said the sense of betrayal Tupac felt was just profound. It lit a fire under him, It fueled his paranoia, but also his legendary work ethic. In his mind, his own people, the East Coast hip-hop community he was a part of, had set him up. And you gotta understand, this context is so crucial. He grew up hearing stories about his aunt, the Black Panther, Assata Shakur, and how responders supposedly mistreated her after she'd been shot. So in his mind, anyone could be an enemy. Tupac wasn't just listening to a song. He was hearing it through this lens of deep-seated fear and betrayal. He was suspecting pretty much everyone around him. So picture this. Tupac's in prison, he hears "Who shot ya?" and he takes it as the ultimate sign of disrespect. The second he gets out, he responds with a track that left absolutely zero room for interpretation.
And wow, the difference in approach here just shows you how much things escalated. Biggie's track, it was shrouded in mystery, but Tupac's response, Hit 'Em Up, that was a direct, all-out declaration of war. It wasn't subliminal at all, it was surgical. He was naming names, making deeply personal attacks. I mean, it's still considered by many to be the most ruthless diss track in the history of hip-hop, period.
So, after looking at all this evidence, where does that leave us? Well, the truth is, the debate is still going on. It continues to this day, and there are really compelling arguments on both sides of the fence.
So let's just break it all down one more time. On one side, you've got a pretty clear production timeline that seems to clear Biggie, and it's backed up by multiple witnesses. But on the other side, you have a mountain of circumstantial evidence. The timing, the tone, the lyrics that made the song feel like a targeted attack. Especially, to a man who was already convinced he'd been betrayed.
Regardless of what the original intent was, you just can't deny this song's impact. Vulture.com ranked Who Shot Ya as the 52nd most defining song in New York rap history. And that just cements its massive, influential, and very controversial legacy.
So was it all just a tragic misunderstanding that spiraled into hip-hop's darkest chapter? Or was it a brilliantly veiled taunt that hit its mark all too well? The real answer probably died with Biggie and Tupac, and it leaves us with this question that really defines one of music's greatest tragedies. It kind of makes you wonder, right? How much of history is shaped not by what's actually true, but by what people believe is true. So, what do you think?